organization has invited me to deliver this lecture. You as AZAPO should feel proud that you are one of the few organizations that have kept the memory and legacy of Steve Biko alive. I also feel privileged that my host tonight is this great university named after Nelson Mandela. I've entitled this lecture, A Blow to the Head. It is obviously a play on the words because that is literally what was revealed in the inquest as the cause of Biko's death. But I also use it as a double entendre. There is a secondary meaning to the title. Steve Biko's death was itself a blow to the head of black society, and maybe a blow to the head of society at large. The subtitle of the lecture is The Murder of Steve Biko. After reading a number of tributes and lectures in honor of Steve Biko, probably about 5 of them, it became clear to me that the story of the murder and the complicity for the cover-up that came afterwards is yet to be fully explored. I have therefore pieced together a narrative based on public sources, archives, and public materials to create not just a picture, but an imagination of the last 5 days of Biko's life. Because Biko was not an isolated man, there is another pressing but forgotten story which provides context and elucidation to the final days of Biko. I shall start briefly with that story. On the 15th of April 1996, Ms. Nontle Mohapi appeared before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. She wanted to tell the story of the death in detention, perhaps more accurately, murder in detention, of her husband, Mapetla Mohapi. This was the first day of the commission, and Ms. Mohapi was the commission's very first witness. In a court of law, the choice of a first witness is a singular decision, as it can shape or sink the trajectory of a case. Yet, right at the outset, Bishop Desmond Tutu, who chaired the commission, announced just before Ms. Mohapi was sworn in to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth, that the commission's proceedings would not be conducted like a court of law. The reason, he stressed, was that he wanted the proceedings to be dignified and respectful to the people whose stories were to be told in that forum. In welcoming Ms. Mohapi, Bishop Tutu would continue. Many of us remember as though it was yesterday when Mapetla died in police custody. We remember the anguish and the horror of those days. We know also, apart from the personal grief that you've experienced, that you yourself have been a victim of human rights violations. Mapetla had been a graduate of the then University of the North, where he became a member of the South African Students' Organization, SASO.
The University of Limpopo is marking its 65th anniversary with a series of celebrations. The milestone coincides with the month in which Black consciousness leader Steve Biko was brutally murdered by the former apartheid government. The university discussed the state of South Africa through the lens of Black consciousness. The institution played a significant role in germinating Black consciousness and resistance to apartheid. We're joined by academic and anti-apartheid activists, as well as former president of the Zanyan People's Organization, Mosibudi Mangena, joins us for a discussion. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. When the apartheid regime banned 18 civic organizations in a targeted attack on media freedom and civil society, many of these organizations were aligned to the Black consciousness movement. So in appreciating that understanding of the high number of organizations outlawed, that speaks to the breadth of impact Black consciousness had on South Africa, doesn't it?
Yes, it was, Black consciousness was the only political vehicle on the road at the time. And so the regime was quite concerned that the movement was conscientizing the black population in a manner that was frightening to the regime itself. You'll remember that in 1976, the country, especially the townships, all over the country, whether it is the Eastern Cape or Gauteng or KwaZulu-Natal or elsewhere, young people were out in the streets, not afraid to confront the army and the police who were armed to the teeth and who occupied every aspect of people's lives. And in particular, they had sent soldiers into schools to teach mathematics, English, Afrikaans, and things like that. So they were everywhere. And they decided, after the murder of Steve on the 12th of September, on October 19, to ban all organizations that were associated with the Black Consciousness movement and other publications and institutions that were sympathized with the movement.
We've just listened to Advocate Thembeka Nkaitobi speaking about how ZAPU should feel proud as being one of the very few organizations trying and still keeping the legacy of Steve Biko alive. Talk to us about that aspect, the importance of it, because I understand that the theme that was being carried today was the state of South Africa through the lens of black consciousness. And maybe perhaps talk a little bit about the scope that was covered as you analyze the state of South Africa today.
Well, the lens that was focused on the country through today, through black consciousness, was damning. And it says that our country is not going in the right direction at all. And the fact that we are in charge as black people, and we come from this difficult history of oppression and abuse by the racist regime. And when we come into power, there is a sense in which we are abusing one another by not serving one another as we should. The municipalities are a shambles, and the schools, the education system is not what it should be. Our people are not safe, particularly women and children. They are being murdered and abused in so many ways. And you can go on and on. The roads are not good. We are in charge, and yet we are not doing what we are supposed to do. We are not taking the majority black people who are deliberately impoverished. We are not concentrating on taking them out of more than 400 years of oppression and denial.
Yeah. Today we heard President Cyril Ramaphosa talking about the country's unemployment issue, saying that on a broader scale the focus should go beyond youth, saying that South Africa, of course, needs to ensure that there is some sort of expansion in that front. And, of course, looking at the unemployment rate rising, in fact, being recorded as the highest in 2 years, what inspiration do you think the country can draw as we look at Steve Biko's legacy and influence, a man who advocated on the need for drastic structural change to address South Africa's society social ills at a time where there was a common understanding of economic exploitation as one of the bases of apartheid?
Well, he worked for and struggled for freedom, for an egalitarian society, for a more humane society, more equal society. And we are more unequal than ever. We are the most unequal country in the world. And that inequality takes racial lines by and large. That is, if you take a broad brush, it's more or less along racial lines. Black people are poor, and the white minority is rich. And the guest speaker, the keynote speaker today at the University of Limpopo was Mjangu Gumbi. And she indicated that the 5 biggest banks in Africa are the ones we know, and they are all owned by white people. The 5 biggest mining companies, the same. The 5 biggest insurance companies, the same. And you can go on, and in 30 years, we have not built anything that black people can be proud of and that they own. And we continue to worship and to serve those who have oppressed us in the past. So what Biko had worked for is far from being achieved under the present circumstances. And we're all agreed at the University of Limpopo that it is because we lack consciousness. We still have colonial mentality. We have got physical freedom in the sense that we vote, we are no longer being arrested, and so on. But psychologically, we remain oppressed. And that's why it is only the African component, in particular of the black population, that believes can't teach their children. We take them elsewhere. And nobody else, no other population groups does that kind of thing in our country.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Academic, anti-apartheid activist and former president of the Azanian People's Organization, Mosibudi Mangena, joining us for that discussion as we look to the legacy of Steve Biko. We do continue on the other side of this to bring you more news. Let's take a look at the weather.